What is up, my friends? This is the Protect Your Neck podcast, and I'm your host, Dan Tom, analyst whose work you can find at MMAJunkie.com. But on this here program, the Protect Your Neck podcast, we break down high-level MMA, and that's what we're going to do here tonight. Whenever you're listening to this, hopefully it's before the fight, because at least this portion of the podcast being recorded Wednesday night, visual with the guests, not the format you're used to seeing, that is if you're watching this, although thank you people on Apple Podcasts, of course. I've got Fernanda Prates from The Athletic, at Nanda Prates. Don't forget that little cheeky underscore at the end if you want to find her and her work on Twitter. What's up, Fernanda?
Thank you for having me. All good. Yes, I have the freaking underscore because some other Nanda Prates stole the... She hasn't tweeted since like 2011. It's very frustrating, but here we are.
I think the original Dan Tom didn't tweet for since 2011 too. Yet there he lies, and here I am. So I got to do some weird underscores when it's on Instagram, but that's neither here nor there. Thanks for joining for a special Yas Island triple title fight card. It's a big one, but it was an excuse to get you on. Thank you.
Oh, I've just been waiting, just staring at the phone. Just like wondering when this call was going to happen, and finally I got it. It's a very special moment. I had a speech prepared, but I'll just do it after the podcast.
Well, I really wish that was genuine, but I'll take it. I'll take it. You know what? I'll take it.
It is. I truly mean it. It's the highlight of my career. Then
you know what? If this feels like it's the highlight of everyone's career, because not to timestamp it too much, but we're in the pandemic COVID era, right? And it's affecting everyone kind of around the world. And if you're someone that's unfortunate enough to follow or work in MMA like us, that is pretty much our lives still. MMA, for all its faults and craziness and faults and craziness, it keeps churning along, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing with MMA. Like I said, we just never run out of things to say about it, and that can go a lot of ways. That can mean a lot of things, but we can say that for sure. We always have shit to discuss.
Yeah,
things. I'm sorry, I swear a lot. People who are listening to the very polite Dan Tom.
Well,
you're in for a ride.
Well, peeling behind the curtain, or in my case, peeling behind the cheap backdrop that I got from the set of the original Batman, It's funny. Before we got on to do this podcast, I'm like, I don't know about you, but it's an unfortunate habit to pick up our phone and check the news. And I'm like, but it's kind of a must. Like with so many fights dropping out, like let me make sure that me and Fernanda don't go and talk about a fight that's been canceled due to COVID or something, right? And sure enough, the timeline never fails. Now, don't worry, folks. At the time of this recording, no one else has dropped off, but fighters are still getting in fights outside of the cage, and racial slurs are still being used. So rest assured, nothing has changed in the MMA world.
Oh, Jesus. And I was going through the same thing. I was looking at my phone, I think I was actually looking to see if they had found an opponent for Frankie or something. Like I didn't even know what exactly I was looking for there. And then it popped in my timeline as well. The fighter, Mike Perry, doing Mike Perry things in his free time, and I just felt the same way. I was like, I should just get Twitter out of my phone for my sanity's sake, but I cannot bring myself to do it. And we need it for work, we do it, but we should get additional pay, like hazard pay for Mike Perry alone.
Tell that to the bar workers of South Florida, Fernanda. Tell that to the bar workers of South Florida. You want to talk about hazard pay and essential services down there? Jeez.
Just being in Florida, I feel like should warrant you some type of hazard pay.
Hey, but
never been. I'm sure it's a lovely place. I'm just repeating what I see on the news.
And speaking what we are seeing and what we are talking about, at least Mike Perry, rounding his back, he was wearing a Fight Island t-shirt. You got to love that. The product placement. He's certainly in the spirit. Me and you, Fernanda, we're not exactly the type. No, I'm sorry, folks. No, this video portion, we're not going to go start any bar fights, but we will celebrate Fight Island and get ourselves in the proverbial mood by talking about fights. So if you guys are down for that, that's what we're going to do here today.
Speak for yourself.
As Fernanda's icing her knuckles down there. I was meaning to ask you about that. What's going on back there?
I was, just warming up a little bit. Bars are reopening. I'll wear a mask. I'll socially distance as much as possible. Use only head kicks because I feel like that's a responsible thing to do.
Speaking of head kicks, I was about to compliment you. I was like, don't let the looks fool you, folks. Fernanda, she can move, and that flexibility. Oh my goodness, I'm so jealous of you and your ability to get those legs up there for the head kick. I can't throw the head kick anymore. My flexibility is gone. So props to you on that.
I have no flexibility. It's all in the hips. I'll do an instructional video and I'll make it free for the listeners of this podcast.
Okay, there we go. You plug it here on the Protect Your Neck podcast. Any instructionals you have coming. But we're going to be doing a breakdown more of the main card today, folks. Main card, UFC 251. As per usual for listeners of this show, we're going to go from top to bottom. We'll list the odds and all that, but really, we're going to talk about all things regarding these fights. And as per usual, for you audio listeners especially, I always recap my picks and plays at the very end because I don't blame anybody for not wanting to listen or much less look at me for extended periods of time. However, thankfully, I have Fernanda to help ease your eardrums and your eyeballs. That being said, I'm respectful of everyone's time, so if you want to hurry up, go to the back just for the picks, you can always do that. I won't be hurt, but feel free to give this video a thumbs up, a subscribe on the old YouTube channel, Daniel Tom MMA, which I know I got to change to Dan Tom MMA to get everything the same. And as you can see below, follow me on Twitter at Dan Tom MMA as well. So with that out of the way, let's get to it. It's headlined, it was supposed to be headlined by Gilbert Durinho Burns. Unfortunately, Gilbert, I believe with some symptoms attached, hopefully he's getting better, but did test positive for COVID. It was removed off the bout. Usman didn't get on an initial plane. However, Masvidal comes in on the official 6 days notice, gets his long, tedious negotiations, if you will, that he's been dealing with, kind of tied up. He's happy enough to show up. Now we have George Masvidal versus Kamaru Usman. Of course, Usman minus 255. A 2.5 to 1 favorite, pretty much, whereas George Masvidal plus 215 underdog. I guess a lot of places to start and unpack here, Fernanda, but were you surprised that this came together?
Oh, for sure. I mean, first off, isn't this the most on-brand MMA thing that has ever happened? Like, the fight that we wanted in the first place ends up happening in just the weirdest freaking set of circumstances possible. I am very surprised. The minute Burns dropped out, like you said, from what I read, the symptoms he experienced was mostly like a big headache. He seems to be doing okay, recovering. So that's good news. But the minute he dropped out, I legitimately thought the UFC was just going to let it rest. We have 2 title fights. We don't need to, be scrambling to find an opponent here. Then people started talking about Masvidal, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, there's no way they pull this off because he has to fly there. He has to get tested. Like, many things really have to come together for them to be able to pull this off. And I was doubting it every step of the way. I'm not ashamed to admit when I was wrong. And I was dead fucking wrong on this one. And then, I read that it was just really about the one test, like the test, like if he passed the COVID test, he would be good to go. And I was still like, no, there's no way. And he's also training in Florida, right, where things are reopening. That's where Gilbert was. And Mike Brown, who is one of the trainers of Jorge, tested positive. So in my mind, I'm just thinking too much has to go right for this to happen. And a lot. I mean, I don't want to jinx it. It's still Thursday. We still have weigh-ins to get through. So I don't want to get too excited yet. But it came together. But yes, for sure, I was very extremely positively, you could say, surprised. I'm still deciding if this is a good thing or a bad thing that this fight is happening. But I was very, very surprised.
Yeah, it's funny. I usually don't record these breakdown shows till like late Thursday night or early Friday morning, and I would argue it's almost better in this pandemic era because kind of what you're alluding to, Fernanda, right? Like, I wouldn't be surprised, and I'm not trying to deflate what we're doing over this video, but between recording this early and the way this card and the way COVID cases have been moving, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there ends up being parts of this video that becomes null and void between now and weigh-in day, right? I mean, a lot of craziness could happen. And kind of what you alluded to, I'm glad you brought up Mike Brown, old Mikey Brown, because a lot of the tests, forgive me, I'm not going to spit them all offhand, but I would say like a good 80 to 90 percentile have been coming from Florida and South Florida, right?
Which surprises a total of 0 people. Like, that's why the UFC was able to hold the events there in the first place, right? Things were a little bit looser, and then the reopening started. And I think this is very unsurprising for everyone, just because if you have a place where things are just floating more freely, and I'm not based in the U.S., my knowledge is limited, but from what I've seen, that's the case with Florida, and with people training more normally, because those first few events, right, you had the fighters training with 1 or 2 people or whoever was available or willing to break the isolation, and trying to kind of like scramble with the gyms opening and things just working more openly. Like, this is a natural development. And yeah, Florida seemed like a prime place. And honestly, Brazil too. I mean, I'm surprised because Brazil, like, I was afraid that would be the case there too. But to my knowledge, I'm trying to remember, because Munoz is also an ATT guy, so
That's
trying
true.
to remember if anybody tested positive before leaving Brazil, but at the top of my head, I can't recall.
Well, I would hope that we would have heard by now in the cases of Zaleski dos Santos, who fights in the prelims, and Jessica Andrade, who we'll be talking about here shortly. But yeah, no, you're not speaking out of school at all. And again, look at me over here. Again, don't let this high quality backdrop fool you, folks. I'm actually in Las Vegas right now. I know, through the movie magic. But Vegas, as you know, we are at the very top of the list, or fighting for our spot as far as states with the highest cases or growth of cases or rate of cases, however increments of measurement you want to put it. We're not doing well is the point. And again, where has the UFC been holding shows? Florida and Vegas. Where are the fighters testing positive? A lot of them are Florida based. Where are a lot of these U.S. fighters having to corral and fly out of? Well, they're bringing a lot of them to Vegas as the staging point. So again, not a lot of coincidences here. And for those who think that the media is celebrating this by any means, no, believe me. As a media member whose job is affected by it, not celebrating it. As a Las Vegan who has to live in one of these most polluted states with COVID right now, definitely not digging it from that end. So believe me, there's no celebrating here, folks. But, you know, we do have to acknowledge these things as far as how they could affect the future plans of our fights.
Oh, yeah. The celebrating thing. And everybody kept saying when we first drew these concerns, right, about the way the events were held. And to the UFC's credit, like, especially with the Yas Island, I feel like they're being held to such an amazing standard. Like, things seem so safe. I've been following John Morgan's. He's doing, like, this sort of diaries for MMA Junkie, right? Just, like, really laying out the procedures and everything. And it sounds like they're doing an amazing job. So props to them for that. But I think we're well within our right to raise questions. And
absolutely.
A lot of people were just kind of like, oh, wait until you lose your job or whatever. And we were all saying, like, this directly affects our job. And I got low-key fired. Well, I'm still working, but I missed my previous arrangement. So I feel like, well, now that I lost my job, can I be critical and talk about it? I feel like I earned it.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm trying to look on the bright side. Silver lining.
You know what?
So we can be an asshole freely.
Yeah, it does feel good, doesn't it? And yeah, no, believe me, like, different circumstances, and I'm definitely feel like I can't complain because, you know, I am still working, not for the same pay, but, you know, I'm still working, you know, so I definitely am not one to complain. And but yes, obviously it's silly for people with those accusations. Because obviously for people in the know, or even that people that don't, can see that it's affected us. Some of the most. Not playing a violin, again, not trying to complain here, folks. And again, to counter it, even though I was one that was critical in the very early stages, mind you, when they were still trying to go in California. I believe it was that April 18th date or whatever it was, when we still weren't sure. Although I was amongst those critical early, you got to give credit where credit's due, and they've been doing an awesome job. And even though it's a bummer that a lot of these COVID tests have been, have affected the main event that we are talking about right now.
Yeah.
You got to give him credit for catching these, and just things that UFC is invested in. Sure, we'd all want to see the fighters paid more. That's definitely another conversation worth having.
Yeah.
But as far as the PI setting up these technologies, or trifecta with the meals, and seeing the meals from the flight over to what they're able to provide for the fighters on site, when you compare that to like what these NBA players are posting on social media,
oh man, depressing. It's like Fire Island type stuff.
oh, it's exactly, like, so again, like, you got to give them credit where credit's due, and
Yeah.
they are doing a lot of stuff within their means, although not everything, of course, but they are doing a lot to accommodate these fighters and make sure they're safe.
Yeah, and even the fact that these fights are falling through is a good sign that things are being caught. Even Marina Rodriguez, right? It wasn't her who tested positive. It was one of her corners, if I'm not mistaken, and she tested negative and decided to err in the side of caution and reschedule the fight still for Yas Leiden before a later date. And we're kind of looking at that with Paul Felder right now. That he might not be able to commentate. Again, tomorrow this all might be different, but he hasn't tested positive, but they're trying to err on the side of caution. So to me, these are all, encouraging signs that this is being taken seriously. So to the UFC's credit, and they deserve credit for it. Like, I feel like these are good signs that they're taking the whole thing very seriously.
Now let's assume that neither Usman or Masvidal lose any more corners than they already have, at least in Masvidal's case.
Jesus.
And let's say let's knock on wood, let's see all the tests come through, right? Now these two are hypothetically stepping in the cage. I won't ask you so much about the odds per se, because those are definitely kind of going in a funny direction. You could argue that the odds could be wider for this fight, short notice or not, but just from a fighter perspective, again, Fernanda, you're no slouch. You understand the sport of fighting. You've been following these fighters, covering and doing a lot of different roles within our space. I love your previews as far as your opinions and viewpoints go. So I'm genuinely curious. We haven't talked about this, peeling back the curtain. Like, what's your opinion on this fight? Does Masvidal have more of a chance than people are giving him credit, or is the opinions about right that Usman should win this?
I'm glad we're not talking odds, because first of all, that's my defense. In Brazil, betting is illegal. So I use that as my excuse for not understanding betting.
There you go.
And I worked for Junkie for like 3 years and had to talk about bet. I feel like I pretended well. Nobody ever noticed. But I still don't understand any of it. So this is like my rational brain, I feel like, is with everyone here. I would give Usman this fight, short notice or not, just because his style is just... to me, at this point, it's just hard to even imagine Usman losing. Like, he hasn't shown me anything. I can't really picture anyone. I kind of thought that Durinho might be a more interesting, like, more challenging matchup for him, just stylistically speaking. But even still, like, I wouldn't put my money on Durinho. And then, so my rational brain says what I think is just the consensus, right? Just the very basic thing that Usman is not going to be stupid. He is going to use his wrestling. He is going to, he has been preparing for a 5-round fight. And that's the thing with Masvidal, that's the unknown. I think even Dustin Poirier was saying that he was his main sparring partner. Masvidal is not the type of guy to just be sitting on his couch and not training. I don't expect him to be out of shape. And I do feel like maybe it was kind of in the back of his mind that he might be a possibility to step in for this fight. So, and he's an intelligent guy. I'm not saying I don't expect Masvidal to get in there and look embarrassing at all. I think he's going to be in shape. But, you just kind of feel like he was the camp. We know what camps are for. They're supposed to prepare a fighter to peak at a certain time. And we can go into how short notice fights sometimes, like, make us question this logic. I've been beginning to feel a lot of ways after the short notice opponents in the Jacksonville events and in the Apex events did so well, because we've been seeing this trend of just influx of short notice guys and they're doing well. So we can go into all of that, but my logic is telling me, taking that all into account, taking the fact that Usman was expected to fight a 5-round fight, I think his style is favorable to a 5-round fight. I feel like he wins this, but in the back of my mind, having seen the craziness that Masvidal pulls off, like, you think, oh my God, he's a wrestler. That's gonna be it. That's what everybody was thinking with Ben Askren, and
Right.
look what he did. It's not like we can expect him to come out with an insane and get that done every time. But I think it does show that he's a resourceful fighter. He's a creative fighter. ATT is a very intelligent camp. They're very good with their game plans. Mike Brown is not going to be able to be in his corner, okay, but I'm sure they talked strategy. I'm sure he's not going to be stupid going into it. So I'm very torn on this one. Like, rationally, I just say put all your money on Usman. Like, this seems like a very clear pick. But in the back of my mind, something just tells me that to never really discount Masvidal, but don't really discount him on this occasion. Especially because psychologically, too, this is so weird.
Yes.
And he's the type of guy that you can throw him in the fire. I don't think Usman is the type of guy that breaks. He's shown that he isn't. It's really hard to talk about fighters breaking because they're essentially what they do is insane. They have to be crazy people.
Totally.
I feel like that factors into the Masvidal is exactly not the guy who would be faced in a situation like this. So I did not answer your question. I evaded it like a true journalist.
No. I think actually I feel a lot of the same way. My heart's gonna be in it for Masvidal, and not even that, but like it's more you can't count him out. What you said, you can't. The crazy things that he's proven to do. He's taken fights on short notice and dating back to fighting Ray on short notice in the Kimbo Street Fight videos when he was in a McDonald's drive-thru, and. Like I was telling one of my other co-hosts for a new project that'll probably be announced by the time people are seeing this. I was like, because everybody knows, from Masvidal's interviews with Gorgeous George and Goes, who of course we both know, right? And they interviewed Masvidal since back in the day, and Masvidal would always rant off on his epic McDonald's orders. And I'm like, telling my buddy, I'm like, most of us will just do the supersizing part of the Masvidal equation. We don't do the taking a street fight 20 minutes after part of it. So Masvidal's just that dude. And great point on Mike Brown too. Like, even though he's not going to be there, you bet your butt that he definitely imparted any knowledge that he could already. Being a fighter himself, Mike Brown, that is, he knows how important getting those certain little tidbits and notes can be. I'm sure they've already given him that. And then, hey, he still has his longtime cornerman, Paulino Hernandez. I know, Fernanda, we get a lot of the same weird American TV references, so I don't know if you're going to get this one. Don't feel bad, but Masvidal's coach, and you can go look this up later, but he looks like this guy, Paulino Hernandez. He looks like Balky from Perfect Strangers, who played Serge from Beverly Hills Cop. It was that actor.
I don't remember. I will not catch that one.
Okay. He looks just like him.
I will look it up.
And I think it's gonna be his good luck charm. You know what I'm saying? But no, honestly though, it is hard to discount Masvidal, and I don't want to sound like I'm playing both sides of the fence either. But there is a lot of that. Now my official pick is gonna be Usman by decision, because I think Masvidal, like you said, I think he is gonna be in shape. Speaking of Gorgeous George and Goes, they interviewed Masvidal at the beginning of this pandemic era. He said he was going to be staying ready for an opportunity like this should it arise. And word on the street, he's brought in big wrestlers like Bo Nickel and others in throughout these past weeks. And you also got Dustin Poirier coming out and saying that he was one of his main sparring partners for like 5 weeks at camp, which should alleviate a lot of the timing concerns. So even though I'm not picking Masvidal, and I don't want to talk out of both sides of my mouth, I think he is much livelier than the odds let on, and perhaps that's why money is coming in on him.
Yeah, true. I don't think he's not the guy who's going to get taken down that easily. Like, I just don't feel like it's going to be controlled as easily as some people might think.
Yeah,
it will be,
I agree. I agree too. In fact, just real quick on that note before we push on, I will say the one path to victory from a technical perspective is not just his counter wrestling, but he's really good at striking off of the breaks in small spaces. And I bring that up, Fernanda, because I think, like, at least for 4 out of the fights we're going to be talking about, including this one, it's a big theme. A big theme is going to be, and could be for a lot of matchups, striking off the break. So look for that with Masvidal to win. However, I think Usman is too suffocating for his wrestling styles. If you want more on that technical nerd stuff, go check out my in-depth breakdown on MMAJunkie.com. Cheap plug.
No, they're good breakdowns though. Whenever I want to sound smart, I read them. And I just remember when we had to do picks for MMA Junkie, I just wait for you to pick first so I can do your picks too.
See, the problem was and I didn't do it strategically. I did it because whether I mean to or not, I seem to be a part of team procrastination and team running late. I
think you're part of team doing all the things though. You just talked about another project and I don't know how many hours your day has. You do all the things and your breakdowns are so long. And I mean that in a good way because they're really detailed. So
thank you.
I don't know. I'm just yeah, check out his breakdowns. Don't expect any of the technical stuff from me. My previews are about GIFs and
hey, you know what?
Just ridiculous references.
Well, there's some references that I'm going to be wanting to pick your brain on. And yes, this isn't the only reason why I brought you on, but sure, when it comes to the Portuguese language or Brazilian fighters, they may have to do with those. So I'm not trying to play the stereotypes here. Don't take offense, but I got some questions, Fernanda. Got some questions.
Oh God. Okay. I'm ready.
We'll get to it. All right, next fight. No Brazilian questions in this next fight, though. However, still no Brazilians. We got Alexander Volkanovski, who's popping off at just over a 2-1 favorite, minus 210, and the comeback on the former champion, looking to get his revenge. We're taking another step at bat right away. In fact, Max Holloway coming in at a plus 175 underdog. So you put $1 on him, you get $1.75 back or something like that, right, kids? All right, this isn't the math show. Dan, that actually wasn't hard math. Well, you know what?
That's putting it in terms I can understand. I can appreciate that.
Yeah, just try.
I need things to be broken down like this for me to understand betting odds.
But hey, regardless of what the odds here, I guess just from a simplistic term. I didn't pick Alexander Volkanovski to beat Max Holloway. He did so fairly convincingly, depending on who you ask. In my opinion, fairly convincingly.
Yeah.
Do you agree or disagree with Alexander Volkanovski now being favored to beat Max Holloway again?
I mean, it's logical. I think him not being favored would sort of be the Rose Joanna. Well, maybe that's different because the first time Rose beat Joanna was quicker. So I think some people thought, it was a fluke. But going into it, her not being a favorite was kind of this kind of speaks to the dominance of people. So I was kind of expecting Holloway to be the favorite just based on the fact that people might have thought that it was a fluke. But obviously you can't do that when you're talking about a 5-round fight. I'm with you. I actually saw the fight again this morning because I didn't remember much of it. History looking back, people started talking about it like such a close fight. And watching back, I was like, no, it was a clear 3-2. Or you could argue 4-1. To me, it was very clear that Alex had won those first few rounds. And I think my question coming into this one is very much, we saw Max Holloway do the mid-fight adjustments needed to win that fight. Will he come in with that mindset this time? At the same time, and this to me, I love rematches because of that. A lot of people don't really like them as much. I do because to me, it's a whole different puzzle that they have to solve. I first time was picking Holloway. I was not really giving Alex Volkanovski that much of a chance, which you mentioned there is no Brazilian angle here, but there is the Brazilian heartbreak angle because they both broke my heart by beating Jose Aldo. And I was there for 2 of those times. But okay. I'll get over it eventually. I'm healing. I'm talking it over with my therapist. But I was not giving Alex much of a chance of beating Aldo too, so I feel like maybe it's more a me problem than a Volkanovski problem. But that fight, so I'm really curious this time because also you hear Max Holloway talking about how he did his training via Zoom and even see his coaches. And do you believe that? Or is the guy's experience as Max? You can go a camp without sparring and still be good to go. But I have all these things going on in my mind with this one, with just what's going on backstage. I again, to answer your question, I feel like it's very logical for Alex Volkanovski to be the favorite, like, because he came in with a good game plan. It wasn't even like he landed one good shot and Holloway was dazed throughout the entire fight, which, I mean, Renan Barão and TJ Dillashaw, remember that? Like, the first time they fought, was fighting so out of it that people kind of wondered if the second fight, being with his full faculties, would be different. Here we had a guy who came in with a good game plan, who he fights really long. Alex, even though he doesn't look tall, he doesn't look imposing. He's a guy who uses his range very well. So you saw a guy who came in very prepared, used the calf kicks very well. Like, he did everything so very right in that fight that I feel like it's absolutely logical for us to think that he's going to do it again. But having seen Holloway adjust the way he did the first time, I'm kind of curious. This is one of those rare cases of a rematch to me that was a very clear win, but that is still very intriguing to see the second one.
I completely agree with you as far as the adjustments that he found. He's going to have to come in with that earlier. Now, in my opinion, those adjustments were body work. And he actually hit him with body work early in the first 2 rounds. He just didn't go to it often enough and abandoned it in the middle. Didn't come back to it till later in the fight. That is Max Holloway. Whereas people are talking about the leg kicks. Now, I think the leg kicks are still going to be a factor. But it's just hard for someone to adjust. And, Volkanovski talked about this in an interview, and I agree with him. It's hard to change your sensibilities, whether it's offensively or defensively, in just one fight. This can take many fights to evolve, whereas Volkanovski has evolved. He came in as that juggernaut who will just go force for force, and he can get away with it with his athleticism, his power, his will to win. But he trains with George Lopez, who should deserve credit as head coach, who he's did the bulk of this training with. But yes, since he branched over and also does training with City Kickboxing and Eugene Behrman, we see it. And you said it beautifully, Fernanda. He fights long for a short guy. And it's kind of, it sounds simpler and less impressive than it is, but it's really impressive. And the fact that...
Because you have tall guys who fight short.
Yes.
Like, you have
the
opposite
exactly. I mean, not as much, but Anthony Smith used to have a real bad problem with that. He used to love to fight on the inside for such a long guy, especially when he was at middleweight, where he was extra taller than everybody. So that's a great point. And even though I did give Volkanovski perhaps more of a shot than most, I still ultimately didn't think he could win his first 5-round fight against Max freaking Holloway. And he showed to be able to do that with his variation of feints and variation of attack. I made this example on another podcast that I did, and it sounds crazy, but John Jones is deserved for the accolades he gets as far as a fighter. And how does he do it striking? He's not a combination guy. He's a single shot guy. So what does he do? He feints and he variates his shots. And it's not that he's not effective or not good. Clearly, he got to where he got to. That being said, I would argue that Alexander Volkanovski is a better feinter and variation artist than John Jones. John Jones is more flamboyant and more dynamic, more even athletic if we're talking about the younger John Jones. But if you look at Volkanovski, he does it all with a purpose. Everything he's piecing together, kind of like a guy we're going to talk about, Peter Yan. Volkanovski turns defense into offense. He's feinting and he's moving defensively, but it's actually, going toward a weak side of Max's or setting up a counter. There's a lot that he's doing in there that just impressed the heck out of me. I think I already submitted my video and my take for Junkie for this fight, Fernanda, but while you were watching the fight this morning, Fernanda, so was I. Like, I keep watching that fight, that Max and Volk fight. There's so much little things to pick off of. I cannot wait to see what the teams are going to do to adjust. But, for the first time ever in my career as an analyst, I'm picking against Max Holloway here. I've never picked against him before, and the Hawaiian is picking against the Hawaiian. Maybe I'm trying to shield myself from the heartbreak that now I'm going to, that Max did to your guy twice. Now I'm going to feel that, Fernanda. Maybe I'm just battening down the doors and getting ready for it. But Volkanovski's the pick here.
Well, I agree with you, and if it's any consolation, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get my heart broken again.
No, we'll get to that in a
Oh
second.
no.
Oh, in fact, you know what? Let's get to that. Is both of our picks Volkanovski there? If I could put
Yeah,
word in your mouth. Okay, name it. Okay,
yeah, yeah,
cool.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's hard. It's hard to get a pick from me, but I mean, I don't like picks. Oh God, I'm such a journalist, like the bad type, the one that like writes
Oh,
an op-ed with like three different sides and doesn't pick one. That's just
it's
my
okay.
charm.
Between my picks that are put in print on MMA Junkie to another place now, as well as this podcast, and then the stupid shit that I say as I raise my hand here, I will gladly take whatever heat. I'll be like a heat sinking missile. I'll take whatever heat. But for the record of the show, I'm just gonna see which side you're leaning toward. We'll phrase it that way.
Yeah, just put Volkanovski there. It hurts me too, though. Even though Holloway broke my heart twice, I am kind of a fan.
Well, speaking of heartbreak, this one's tough because again, I hate the UFC for putting my favorite fighters against each other. And I love Peter Yan. I've been watching him since ACB 32, since that epic battle with Magomed Magomedov. That was like my Bonner versus Griffin, where like you tune into something accidentally and you're like, "What's this?" and you're enthralled. However, like Jose Aldo's been one of my favorite fighters for 10 years. And I don't know why this is, Fernanda. Like most MMA fans and pundits and media, gambler, anybody in the MMA space, the trend is when someone loses, they suck. They go down in
Yeah.
value. And for me, when Jose Aldo lost, even though I picked Conor McGregor, and to win that fight, when that happened in 13 seconds, I feel like I became even more of a Jose Aldo fan as I simultaneously just felt terrible because I just saw all these people, and it hasn't really let up in a lot of ways, sadly, like disrespect the dude's resume because of a 13-second quick loss, which, like we said, not taking anything away from Rose and Joanna, but those things tend to happen. In fact, we usually like to see rematches when they happen, yet Jose kind of got left with a sour bag, it feels like.
Oh, absolutely. And it broke my heart because I'm going to let you in a little secret. We all know they'll have to be impartial and whatever. And I feel like I am really fair in what I write and what I do as a journalist. But, you work long enough with certain players, you start getting attached to them or appreciating them in a deeper human level. And Aldo's one of those people for me. When he lost to McGregor, I cried. It's the first time I cried ever. It was the only time I ever cried covering this and watching this. And I was at a bar crying like a freaking baby, and nobody understands. And I think the reason why I was really emotional about that one, it wasn't just that Aldo lost, but just that I kind of knew that was going to happen because I just kind of knew that would be such a heavy stain, an unfairly heavy stain on Aldo's legacy. I kind of just felt that at that moment. I think American audiences, I don't think they understand Aldo as much as we do. There's a language barrier, but also there's a personality barrier. Aldo's such a Brazilian guy. He's such an example of Brazilian hustle, of just coming out of nowhere and making something out of himself, and just he's so laid back. He's the opposite of Conor McGregor in so many ways, right? McGregor living that flamboyant life and being that. So Aldo he's a quintessential Brazilian character. And I feel like that's why people love him so much here. And I don't feel like American audiences really understand that. So I kind of felt like his legacy would be very much hinging on wins, on tangibles. Because when you can't really grasp the intangibles, right? Like that's what you cling to. And so that loss hurt me because of that. And I do agree with you. I feel like after that, he has always had to like sort of prove himself again, and he's done it, right? So he beat Frankie the way that he did, which was a beautiful win, became champion again. Then he loses to Holloway, and everybody's like, he's done, he's out, that's it. But then, he gets these wins, and nobody was really, I thought Moicano was going to beat him, like at this point, because it felt like a passing of the torch of sorts, right? He wins these fights that he has no business winning, and then loses again, and then everybody's just kind of like, he's done. Yeah, that's it. He's like 32. He's
Yeah.
it's just so weird because we've seen him fighting for so long. So Aldo to me is one of those guys with a weird, complicated legacy, and I feel like people are always just very much willing to cling to the losses and not really give him credit for the rest. And then you look at his resume, like what are those losses? McGregor, the way that happened, Holloway and Volkanovski. Like there's really no shame in that.
I don't know what it is, man. Like this 32 or 33s, like I feel like, you rewind 10 years and I was saying the same thing about the Nogueira brothers. Like, look how messed up Big Nog looks like. He's 32 years old. Like,
Yeah.
like,
But he was like 52 in fighter
true.
years.
Yeah.
Like,
I remember like
look at his twin, and it's very clear.
I remember after like the Tim Sylvia fight, and he is like all had his like kind of face messed up, and he's like, Randy, come fight me. And my friend is just I'm American too. I don't know why I'm saying this, but, I'm in America, right? So my American friend's just jaws drop still. Like, how did this guy win? And I kind of go and whisper in his ear. I'm like, the craziest part is that guy Nogueira came into the fight looking that fucked up. Like,
He looked more fucked up going like weighing in.
Yes.
It seemed like it pained him to go on the scale and then he'd show up for the fight. But he was a training. He still is. He trains a lot. He was a training maniac, and you can't really compute. But he like. Think of his resume. That will age a person.
yeah.
That will age a human being. Aldo's fighting smaller people, but the top of the division. That's one thing that nobody can ever take away from Aldo, right? Like he was consistently fighting the best of the best for so many years. I don't know. I just feel like if you want to discount that legacy, like you're a hater. That's it.
But while we're talking about the Nog comparison, length of career, that actually segues nicely to the grappling because even though Jose as well as Big Nog, Antonio Rodrigo, even though they moved away from jiu-jitsu competitions as their MMA careers progressed, lest we not forget, I believe it's like technically a four-time World Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu World Champion, not just a black belt, comes from an acclaimed black belt school, Nova and Yao, with a lot of black belts who know how and have experience applying their games to MMA, whether it's his stablemates or Dede, Andre Pederneiras himself, right? So he has those skills there, but there's this kind of canary in the coal mine I have. Now, mainly it's for wrestlers, Fernanda, but I believe it applies here, and you can tell me your opinion on it, but whether it's they fall in love with their striking, which you could accuse Aldo of because he does so damn good with it. He's become one of the best strikers ever. Or because grappling, especially wrestling, to get it to the ground, you need wrestling, right? And wrestling takes a lot of knees, back, and neck. These things that typically go with fighters, whether you're a wrestler or a jiu-jitsu guy. So part of me with this canary in the coal mine, I wonder, regardless of the reason, whether it's their body, and they're not going to tell us that because they're fighters, or whether it's their stylistic sensibilities, either way, everybody's doing this. This is the common thread of all the sample size, Fernanda. They're doing this. They're getting further away from their grappling base, right? And I bring that up because I feel like that is the glaring hole if you're strictly looking on paper on where Aldo has the advantage against Peter Yan.
Yeah. And nobody ever factors that in. Like nobody's even none of what I read is like, oh, then Aldo maybe should grapple Yan, and because we forget that, like you said, it really is his roots. I think, and people will, I think most people just consider Aldo a striker. If you've ever seen him, that's how he fights. We don't really see a lot else, right? It really is his roots, and like you said, that the Pederneiras, like the whole thing, like Nova União, they're very attached to the jiu-jitsu. Like Léo Santos is also gonna fight on Saturday, who is became one of Nova União's trainers. He's gonna fight for the first time in like 10 years. I don't know, it's been forever. They have a very strong grappling base, a very strong grappling heritage, and you don't even factor that in anymore. Like you said, I hadn't even stopped to think about it, but I do feel like it might be just a thing of just the way that your body works and ages, and it starts becoming a little more incompatible with that style. But I don't know. I think you're right. Like that could be a very clear way to win, a much smarter way to win. On the feet, I think everybody just kind of is fearing for the worst here, but at the same time, I don't think a lot of people are really expecting Aldo to do it.
I think my theory kind of falls in the middle between whether it's the body or the style. I also think it's an energy management issue because you often hear this stereotype, and it was more of an early. It kind of died out in the mid-aughts. We don't hear it as much anymore, but they would often say, "Oh, he's a kickboxer, so if you want to have a kickboxing fight, he can kickbox all day." I think there's more truth to that stereotype than the grappling one. For example, he's a wrestler. If you want to have a wrestling fight, he can wrestle all day. Well, no, not necessarily. I've heard plenty of wrestlers from Chael Sonnen and onward say you can only wrestle for 3 out of them 5 rounds. Humanly possible. I mean, even Khabib, right? We saw him dominate guys like Edson Barbosa, and Ally Quinta or other guys who are high-level fighters, but about the third round, including same with McGregor, about the third round, all those fighters actually had their best rounds against Khabib, even though they spent the first 2 getting dominated, because even someone like Khabib, who's an insane athlete and wrestler, kind of needed a break, right? So part of me wonders if it's energy management, because as we round to the striking part of this, to complete this conversation and breakdown, if you will, everyone also asks, what happened to Aldo's leg kicks? Or what's always the breakdowns like, I think the other guy's going to win. But if Aldo brings back those leg kicks, and we can talk about the credence of that or not or whatever, but this is what I want to bounce off you, I guess. And I know you didn't go research what the corners are saying or whatever, but it's hard for me because I don't speak Portuguese, so I have to rely on the translation that's being offered by production. But however, when I do watch the Aldo corner, what I'm getting from the translator is that his corner is usually telling Aldo to not throw the leg kicks toward the end of rounds or toward the end of a fight. And for me, sometimes, sure, this might have been against like a grappling opponent, like a Korean Zombie early on. They were worried about it. But for me, it's like, they don't want to give up takedowns, and they don't want to, have him maybe burn his energy too early, because we've seen that become a problem for Aldo as his career progressed. So part of me thinks that, kind of long-winded here, but the leg kicks and the grappling are tied together, that it's more of an energy management issue. Aldo, just for whatever reason, is more comfortable just to box guys these days.
Could be. I don't know if that applies to the grappling, but I mean, for sure, the leg kicks, that's absolutely reasonable, that you don't want to open yourself up to the takedowns. Something, and he gets asked that a lot. I'm trying to remember which fight, but once that was asked, I think it was maybe the first Holloway loss, and that they, don't hold me to that, but I'm pretty sure that was the case. And that they said that he was hurt in that fight, so he wasn't using the kicks that much. Aldo never said that himself, but that they said in an interview that he was hurt, so he wasn't really able to use the leg as much as he wanted to. But then Aldo would also say, people wise up to these things. And obviously, you go into an Aldo fight and everybody's expecting the leg kick, so it's not like anybody's just going to sit there and expect the leg kicks to happen. But I also think it might be an energy management type thing, absolutely. Like you said, I think Aldo got really unfairly pegged as this guy who gets us out, because I feel like he corrected that early on in his UFC career. He fought 5 rounds consistently and showed that he could really maintain the pace throughout. But it could very well be that, for sure. I'm going to actually pay attention to the corner now that you said that, to see if that's the thing that comes up. I don't even know who's in Aldo's corner, because I think that they didn't come with him this time around.
Maybe, Well, that will be very interesting too. And as far as striking goes, I'm not sure the leg kicks will matter too much, because Peter Yan will switch stances, and he does a lot of southpaw, and I actually wouldn't be surprised to see him do a lot of southpaw. Given that southpaws have win or lose been some of Aldo's tougher fights, so I actually like that from Jan's perspective. But let me ask you about this. I heard I don't even remember what podcast this was from, and I searched it and nothing came up in the initial search. But Eduardo Dantes, apparently there's an interview where he was saying that Peter Yan actually trained with Jose Aldo. Have you heard about this?
They did train. He went to Avignon for a little bit. It was years ago. Gui Cruz posted actually a picture, I think, for Gui Cruz from MMA fighting. Right. He did a lot of athletes passed by Avignon. Remember, because it was really just the the place to be for a while. It was kind of like the gym for a few years there, especially when both Hina and Aldo were at the top of the game. And I think
Yeah.
that's when a very young Peter Yan trained a little bit there. He's 27 now? And I'm guessing this was at least like 5 years ago.
Yep.
So it was a while back, but he did train there for a little bit.
Yeah, and Peter Yan's not shy of international training. Of course, he does most of his camps in Thailand at Tiger Muay Thai, and he's been doing that for about 5 years now. So that 2015, I mean, that puts you right in that prime pocket of Nova and Yao for sure. So I could totally see him there as a young kid. And according to Dantas, obviously, especially if it's a featherweight Aldo, and maybe Aldo 5 or 6 years ago, according to him, to no surprise, he was getting the better of the exchanges. Is that what you heard as well?
That Aldo was getting the better of the exchanges?
Yeah.
Well, Dudu would say that, though.
True.
But like I said, I think that Young grew so much and over. I'm actually looking to see if I find the year in which that happened, because I'm thinking it was even before 215. But I wouldn't doubt that at all. Like with so much. Oh, okay. With I'm looking at the story.
All good. And even if
2016.
Okay, yeah, so
when
4
Aldo
years.
was in the rematch for UFC 200.
Wow. And Aldo was still looking very good then. That was an underrated Aldo. Even though Frankie Edgar didn't look great in that fight, Aldo still looked really good in that fight. That being said, regardless of how those sparring matches went, Peter Yan has this like evil grin about him. Like that you really, it's disturbing if you're in the ring with him, obviously, but if you're somebody who wants to look for good fighters, like he has all the signs. And, it sucks because now that ire is going to be directed toward Aldo, and he doesn't seem the type, like, for example, Moicano I love Moicano because he seems like such a nice guy, but I almost felt like that being a nice guy and a respectful guy worked against Moicano when he went against Aldo.
He's a low-key psycho, though. I'll give you that. Like, remember his last fight in Brasilia when he submitted, what was it?
And he started yelling. That was weird.
Yeah. He started yelling at him because he was submitted, and then because he wanted to fight longer. And backstage, he said he was like, "I don't know what." We asked like, "What the fuck was that?" It's like, "I'm just fucked up in the head." Like that was literally his. I'm just fucked up. I'm just crazy. So
at least he admits it.
is deceiving. He's a really nice guy. All indications are that he's a really nice guy. I'm just saying there's a little bit of psycho in him.
I get along. I'm a bigger Moicano fan now. Let's just say after hearing that, I relate to that. No.
Who among us, isn't low-key a psycho? I mean, all of the interesting ones at least. But I absolutely see where you're saying that he maybe respected him a little bit too much or had that reverence. And even being Brazilian, and I feel like that's a different type of reverence that you're going to have if you're Peter Yan. And I'm pretty sure Peter Yan is also a psychopath. I'm terrified of that man. I'm very scared. He makes me very intimidated. I'll just say that.
Exactly. Aldo, if you're watching, watch out for the body shots and the uppercuts, because I think that's what he's going to attempt to look for if you're asking me. But
pass the message along. I am curious though with Dede. Like I'm not even sure, but I haven't seen him there. And I don't remember the last time Aldo didn't fight with Dede in his corner.
I remember. I can't remember who said this, but somebody was saying, I don't know if it was like someone from was it Holloway's camp, but someone said there's a saying where they were like gonna fight Jose Aldo, and they weren't sure if Dede was going to be there or not, and they saw him there in the fight week, which meant he was going to be in the corner. And I forget, one of the coaches or corner said, Dede don't leave the house for nothing. And that always stuck in my head. And I always, every time I see Pederneiras, I always think, Dede don't leave the house for nothing.
Yeah, he stopped cornering for most of the fighters at Nova União because he did that a lot, and it was very taxing on him all the traveling. But obviously Aldo is more like a son to him than anything else. So he was infected with COVID a little while back. I don't think he's there with him. I'm legitimately curious to see how that affects. I don't remember seeing Aldo without him, but he could have fought without him, and I'm just misremembering it.
Same. All right, next fight. Rose Namajunas versus Jessica Andrade, the rematch. Namajunas, of course, doing really well, looking amazing in her title defense at that time. Gets knocked out after committing to a double wrist lock Kimura grip. Jessica Andrade is the rule of thumb, slamming her on the Kimura side, as we saw with Nate Diaz versus Rory McDonald, except she was able to get a knockout this time around, loses the title to Wei Li Zhang by first round knockout. Now, as they meet for the rematch, despite winning the first time around, Andrade is the underdog, and Rose is popping off at a 2-1 favorite. Does that surprise you at all? Maybe the way I frame it is a little biased there, but does that surprise you at all?
No, I mean, the way Rose was looking early in their fight, it really seemed like she was fighting an amazing fight, like she was en route to winning. I remember I was sitting right there, like media row for that one, and it had been a very sad night for us because Aldo had lost and Anderson Silva had lost in that very weird way to Jared Cannonier. I'm thinking that's the same night. I'm pretty sure. So you
Yes.
had Jessica Andrade and the mood here, it's so deflated and so sad. And it really did seem like we were just about to see that happening again with Rose. She was looking so sharp, and then it happened. I'm not surprised, mostly because I think also the way Andrade won that fight really contributed to this narrative that I feel is a little unfair, that she's all bronze, like all power and nothing else, right? Like she got really pegged as that. She's just really strong and she overpowers the girls, and that's how she wins fights. And the way that I don't think that's entirely fair. But the way that she won that fight, I feel like really corroborated the narrative. And then she goes and loses real fast to Wiley, and I think it really made that got lodged in people's brains. So people who saw that fight and think Rose was winning probably think that it was a fluke, that it was just her power and the way that the situation unfolded and Rose's sort of brain fart in that moment that contributed to it. So no, not necessarily surprised, and I don't necessarily disagree with it either, I guess. I would pick Rose for that one too.
I'm picking Rose for this one too. However, it does kind of make me worry. The line keeps, the money keeps piling in on Rose, and so from a betting perspective, I warn anybody, jumping off that cliff, even though my pick is Rose, because something else revealed to me is speaking of the head coach narrative, right? Is she going to have her head coach there, Trevor Whitman, and how much has she been working with him? This camp, apparently she went over and did a lot with Greg Nelson over in Minnesota. Greg Nelson, of course, was the head coach of Sean Shirk back in the day. He hasn't coached as many high-level notable guys, at least, on the UFC stage, to my knowledge, but he is a good coach, so no shade there. But again, changing things up, right? For better or worse, there's always weird adjusting periods. Whereas, I don't know if you've interviewed Jessica. She's one of the few fighters who I've interviewed and interviewed in person when she was working out here for a little bit. And she seems like she's got a really tight relationship with her coach. I know that team got a lot of crap for the Priscilla Cachoeira stoppage, and I guess their comments or attitude kind of toward it. And whether you want to agree with that kind of an attitude or not, fighters and even their teams, as we're learning when we get their opinions on stuff like corner stoppages, whether we agree with it or not, you almost have to have this, I don't want to say arrogance or false sense of invincibility, but let's be honest, it's kind of what it is. And it is a prerequisite in its defense somewhat, right? So I don't blame them for having that. And also I could genuinely care. I could genuinely tell that coach has so much care for his fighters, his girls, his men. It doesn't matter. You could tell he's a really caring coach. So I'm not willing to cast any dispersions. And in fact, I got to imagine a tight bond, or coaches that have those tight bonds are going to probably thrive pretty well as far as improvising their training situations in the pandemic era.
I'm always going back and forth in these situations. So you were right. Jessica Giliard Paraná is her coach. She considers him a second dad. She talks about it a lot. Like they have a bond that she's never leaving him. I just read that she's thinking about relocating to Vegas so she can take short notice fights. That took me entirely by surprise. I don't know how that will work. I don't think Giliard would move. He has his gym in Rio and a baby and whatever. I don't know that he might coordinate her training from afar, but They do have a very tight bond, and Jessica Andrade has really has been training for her entire UFC career, at least in the same gym, Paraná Vale Tudo. And and no shade, but she's the one big star there, the one. Other, she trains with a lot of girls who are just starting out. Carol Rosa, I think, is fighting the same card. You have some girls who are coming up, Priscila Cachoeira, like you said, who, even though she had a terrible start to her UFC career, she just got a big knockout a few months ago. I don't know, a few thousand years ago, because this year.
Yeah, right. Yeah, seriously.
But for a long time, I was a little critical of it, I must admit, because I kept thinking that Jessica was so talented that in my mind, I felt like she needed maybe to leave. And in Brazil, you have a very strong culture of you're considered a traitor if you switch gyms, right? Like, you have to have that loyalty. Vitor Belfort got a lot of crap for a really long time because he was never loyal to a gym. He jumped around gyms a lot. And so for a long time in my mind, I can't have that idea that, Jessica's really limiting herself here because she's training with people who aren't as high level as she is. Again, no shade. They're just at a different stage of their careers. But now when you, like you were saying, then I think about it, how valuable that bond may very well be, it could be the opposite. You see the opposite, a fighter like Cláudia Gadelha, who was with Nova União for a really long time, left. Good on her. She wanted to pursue other things. She felt very overtrained at Nova União. She wanted a new style of training, really. Then we have, even in Brazil as a whole, I feel like Brazil, a lot of Brazilian fighters, and I'm going on a big tangent here, but complain about overtraining in Brazil.
Right.
Because there's this culture. I think it's a culture of the Brazilian that we feel like we need to work so hard for things, and the training is different. Obviously, it's adjusting here too. With time, things change everywhere. But I heard from a few fighters, Haniahia, even Moicano, when they went to ATT, that they appreciated the rest. Cláudia was the same person. But going back to my point was just that, they felt like, they went from sparring every day to sparring like twice for.
Yeah, totally.
Or just having like 2 training sessions a day, and maybe sometimes 1 if they're not feeling up to it, and they're kind of like, "What is this? What is the rest? I have a day off. What is this strangeness? Magnets? How do they work?" But Cláudia switched gyms a lot, and it ended up. I was just talking about this the other day with a friend. Like, is that what's hurting her right now?
Yeah.
Cláudia won her last fight. She's won a few in a row, but I feel like a lot of people kind of don't. We're expecting more of her at this point of her career. For a while there, it seemed like it was her and Joanna sort of running unrivaled in the UFC. So I have that question a lot in my mind now. I begin to think about it a lot. Just if maybe what I thought in the past was kind of like a fault could actually be one of the things that really helped Jessica Andrade get to where she is now, because I feel like she's one of the fighters that nobody expected to get to this point of her career. When she first started in the UFC, I don't think anybody was giving her a shot in hell of becoming champion. Okay, not anybody. I'm speaking for myself. I was not giving her a shot in hell of becoming champion. And, she did. Say what you will. I think she's a more talented and well-rounded fighter than people give her credit for, and she's done all of that with the same gym. So who am I to say anything or criticize?
No, that's actually great insight, because like when I interviewed her, it was in the January of 2017, so she was just coming off of a big only her second or third, but a big strawweight victory over Joanne Calderwood, right? I believe at that time. And she's out here in Vegas, and she's training with Angelo Reyes for her boxing at UNLV Boxing. And that was my connection. And, she wanted to take advantage. I think she was healthy. I think she won in the first round. So she wanted to take advantage and stay out and train. So even though she already won a fight, she was going to Extreme Couture, Syndicate, all these different gyms and sparring. And of course, her coach Piranha there was with her, overseeing the training. You could tell Angelo understood their bond, and he was being really respectful, but at the same time was trying to express to her and kind of sell her, not a false bill of goods. I mean, really just sell her in the fact of show her the opportunities which are here in Vegas, as much as I might not like Vegas being, my own personal feelings on it living here. But yeah, as a fighter, there are a lot of opportunities. So it's interesting to see that beach ball still kind of be kept alive as far as a conversation. And here she is. She's, I know she just lost the title, but she's still doing well. And you're right. At 135, I wouldn't have expected her to be a top 5 fighter, much less a champion. Because at 135, that version of Andrade looked like she was just showing up because she liked to fight. I was like, oh, okay. The UFC needs girls to build this division, because keep in mind, folks, there was only one female division at this time. You're like, okay.
The ancient days.
What's that?
The ancient days of 2013 or
yes
14.
Right, it's crazy. So we don't know what to think, and if you were to have to place bets, you're like, okay, there's some definitely staying power in this division, but I don't think Jessica Andrade is it. And sure, she wasn't it for 135, but look at her now. And just like that boxing coach Angelo Reyes was pointing out, there's a lot of unique things in her game for people, like to your point, Fernanda, that are just writing her off as just bronze and muscle. No, and in fact, she's actually a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt now, although I still think that Rose's submission threats will be live in this fight.
Oh, Jessica she's actually a very active grappler. I think she stopped now, but she competed in grappling for a really long time. And it's also her introduction to it. Her first thing, her original thing was Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
So, and again, we kind of forget that because we just think of her as this very powerful person. To me, the fight that really showed her, got me sold on her, was the Claudia Gadelha fight specifically. Because I did not give her a shot in that one. I felt like this is the fight that the technician is gonna really overcome the powerful person. And to me, the way that it's not that she's not powerful, her power is a major asset. You cannot discount that. Claudia later said that she hits like a flyweight man. And I was like, don't doubt it. She was really impressed. She was like, this was insane. She really felt her power. But I feel like just the fact that she's able to use that power to her advantage so well is a testament to her game, and is a testament that she's a better fighter than people give her credit for.
So I fought my urge to ask about Brazilian sayings, especially the Jose Aldo Gravedigger saying, but I do gotta. Don't worry.
I didn't know that saying, by the way.
I know. But I do gotta ask one thing, because I've seen other people aside Andrade, the total ignorant, showing my my ignorance on culture here, but I love the headdress. And for me and my ignorance, it just reminds me of a Native American headdress, because that's mainly us Americans' point of reference. But can you tell us what, or do you know what Andrade pays homage to, that she's been wearing the headdress after a lot of victories, like she did it after the Claudia fight that you referenced?
Yeah, it's I don't know actually if her family has any indigenous roots, but it's very likely, because in Brazil that's very common. All of us have some type of it in our heritage. But that's her way of sort of connecting to Brazil and to her roots. But I legitimately don't know if that's there's a legit family thing. She talked about it, I remember, afterward, and just talked about sort of feeling empowered by it. But I really don't know if there's a deeper family connection there.
Well, one of my favorite walkouts, you can look it up later, Fernanda, is Genki Sudo at I think K107. And he comes out to a similar, he's got this crazy headdress on, and it just reminds me of it. It's super cool. But cool. I was just curious about that. But yeah, I guess we're I don't want to throw you under the bus, but we're leaning the same way, if I can say that, there with Rose Namajunas. But again, folks, don't follow us off any cliffs here. We're just giving you our opinions. Don't empty your bank account.
Don't ever follow me off any cliff. That's the one tip I can give you with some certainty in life. But yeah, I would pick Rose Namajunas for that one.
Well, I don't want to abuse having you on the podcast for the first time. So let's get to this last fight here, and then I'll let you give any other shouts to any matchups or anything else you want on the way out. But kicking off the main card, we have Amanda Hebos at minus 750, which is actually, it's come down a bit. So she's a 7.5 to 1 favorite to beat Paige Van Zandt, who currently is listed as a plus 525 underdog. I mean, fights
She's
this
the biggest
wide.
favorite, right?
Yeah, I mean, like fights this wide in MMA though. Isn't there some kind of like rule of thumb where we kind of got to be skeptical in general? Like, because how many, especially this year, like Kama Worthy alone has scored some huge upsets. Like, I feel like anything like where you just start seeing it over anything over like a 5 to 1 favorite in either direction, you got to kind of squint your eyes at. But at the same time, I don't see how Paige wins this fight. What do you think, Fernanda?
I'm exactly with you there because I was just thinking the same thing. Like, that's a lot. Like, 2020 doesn't agree with this. So my instincts say that if I have $20 I never want to see again, I'm putting them on Page. But I'm like you there. Like, if I have to pick an avenue for her to beat Hibazin, I can't think of one. And that's not a detriment to Van Zandt as much as it is a testament to how complete Hebaz is. Even her background is so diverse. Like, she was part of the judo national team, but she's also clearly a very competent striker. And she was basically born on a mat. Her father was a Vale Tudo fighter back in the day. So she is to me the kind of like this idea that we have of a very new, complete MMA fighter. Maybe what they wanted to sell as Paige being early on, in her career. I don't know, but I really have a tough time, and again, not a detriment to Paige Van Zandt because I don't see Amanda Hebos losing to a lot of people, even higher up in the 115 division. I was sort of curious to see how she would do against a very experienced person because I think it was very impressive what she did against Mackenzie Dern, but at that point we were all kind of like sort of expecting that to happen to Mackenzie Dern, right? We were just kind of like, somebody's going to show up and do this. So it wasn't as shocking, I think, to see that happening. But then with Honda Marcos, who, has a very inconsistent record, we know all of that. We know all of that about her career arc, but who is a veteran and who is intelligent and who I felt like could be a test to Amanda Hebos just because I wanted to see how she would do against that type of opponent. And she passed that with flying colors. So at this point, I am just very, very confident in Amanda Hebos. I'm expecting 2022 to do something weird. I always am, and I really like Paige Van Zandt. To be perfectly honest, I think she's awesome. I love that she's out there saying, "You know what? Pay me. Yeah, I'm worth more than wins and losses. This is, I make more money on Instagram. Like, you do you, boo. That's amazing, empowered, love it." Can't get enough of it, but I just don't see her beating Amanda Hebos.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about Amanda for sure, but I just will say about Paige, I feel bad for Paige because she always, like, don't get me wrong, I'd be lying if I said I didn't see her put out, something cringy here or there or something. Oh, yeah. But at the same time, like, the way you have to remember how our culture is and do your best, I guess, not to get sucked into being overly critical on people who are stuck having to be in the public eye, which we know in any increment, it's not a very polite place to be, especially if you're a female, which I already think it's a cruel place without having that point of perspective. So you go and times that by 10 by being a female like Paige Van Zandt, and I feel bad for her. I don't have any other way to say it because you just see how vicious people are. So I'm rooting for Paige to get paid regardless of what happens in this fight, and I have no hate on that. But man, is it going to be hard to hate on Amanda Hebos because not only does she have all the diverse skills that you talked about, which is important, but like even after being considered, like, she's so good that she suffers a KO loss. She gets hit just the right spot by Polyana Viana, who's also in the UFC and, no slouch. Or maybe she's not. I know she suffered quite a couple losses, but still, it's not like it's to a nobody. And she even gets tapped out in an EBI match, right, to a not as known name. So, perhaps I biasly thought people that I know, that I like, Emily Whitmire, had a chance, but she goes out and submits the submission girl, beats Mackenzie Dern on the feet, putting all the skills going to American Top Team, which I think is just a great balance because we're seeing that cage wrestling from her to go with her judo and her jiu-jitsu. Her striking's coming along great. But she also has great personality, and you said it with Aldo, where it's a shame people that aren't, native to Brazil or native Portuguese speakers are probably not getting the same experience as Aldo as you and many, right? So we don't get to see all of his personality. Where there's something about Ribas when I was watching her post-fight interviews, it's super endearing, and granted, I'm told Aldo's English is better than what he leads on. So I don't want to say that her English is better. So granted, Ribas is attempting to speak English to a primarily North American audience. Obviously, that's going to help. But I think it's more than that. She really has this endearing character. Like, she's super game, and, you see her almost talking crap to Dern. But as soon as the bell rings, you see her endearing go, like, to every girl, even though she knows she beats them, she almost feels bad. She's like, I'm sorry. Are you okay? Like, you could see her checking on her physically, morally, like, she's spiritually, like, she's trying to make sure everybody's okay. Like how can you hate this girl, man? I don't know. Am I seeing things? Are my rose-colored glasses too tinted over here, Fernanda?
No, she radiates positive energy, and like I'm a grouch, so it annoys me. Like I cannot like her. Like I wanted to dislike her.
Right.
If you're this happy, something's up. Something's off.
Right.
Like you must be faking. Like it can't be genuine. But what I hear from people, and I interviewed her dad too, by the way, for a story I wrote on her for The Athletic, and he's the same way. They're both like super high energy, like charged up to all the way up to here. So she very much has that personality, and it's infectious. Her smile, her laugh, and you could see because just her first win, right? She was already, people were asking, who's that girl who's laughing in the mic, who's saying all those things?
Yeah.
And she was in the U.S. for quite a few months. At ATT, she had trained there before because I don't know if you remember, she got caught in something that proved to be a tainted supplement, and she got it was really rough. She got signed, had the fight scheduled, got flagged, then got the fight pulled, and she was already training at ATT at the time, and she stayed there for like another, I don't know, she probably stayed there 9 months total. That obviously helps with the English too, and what I liked about all of this was her attitude, because the doping thing, which wasn't doping, it was proven to be a tainted supplement, and it could have really broken her, and it didn't. She could never make it to the Olympics. She busted her knee, had to have surgery and then a second surgery to fix the first surgery because it was botched. She didn't lose that spark. And you mentioned the loss to Poliana Viana. It was a jungle fight loss, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And she slips, she gets punched, she slips, and then she kind of makes a rookie mistake there. And even then, her dad was saying that's done, because they thought she was going to get to the UFC after that. He was crushed. He thought her UFC shot was over. They blew it. And he said she cried next day at the gym.
Wow.
Getting better. So he was just like that. She was like, imagine somebody who really benefited from a loss. That was her. And that, to me, I think that's what shows. It's just that sort of attitude, positive attitude that I find, quite frankly, alarming.
Yes.
It's just strange. How can you be so fucking positive?
I'm mad, but I wish I had it too, because I'm looking at it and I'm like, that's so damn useful, not just as a fighter, but a fighter in this pandemic era, right? You're looking at, okay, maybe something goes wrong and that gets the better of them, and then things like, I know with me personally, once one thing goes bad, I start to unwind and unravel. But
me too.
But with her personality, it's like she looks fucking unshakable. Like, I don't know what I don't think a positive COVID test could bum her out. Like, I'm like, what is going on?
Exactly. Some fighters do the mean thing, right? Like, that's the way that they get in the zone, and that's the way that they feel shielded. I feel like she feels shielded by just her positive attitude. And again, alarming, disturbing, unnerving, but good on her. Even I can't hate on that.
And I love it too, because it's whether you love it or not, it's genuine. And you go back on Fight Pass, especially some of these newer fights. where the production, they kind of just threw the fight up there and they kind of left the dead space, like where the production's on commercial break. So the fighters are kind of waiting for the announcement, and it's the stuff you don't normally see. And I love watching that because you can see the fighters interact with each other. You can kind of see their character, like are they concerned about their opponent, whether they won or lost. You could tell a lot from the person, let's just say.
Yep.
And I'm watching, because I always love to watch when the cameras are off, so to speak, even though they're the center of attention. And you're watching, and she's still being just a goofy, giggly, like, ah! And she's like, I'm like, oh my god, she's still the same person. Okay, so yeah, I think it's gonna take a lot to get her thrown off, and I think that Paige Van Zandt's toughness, sadly, like we've seen before, at best, it's probably gonna get her. I don't want to say beat up, but probably hanging in a fight if it's not going in her way, longer than she needs to be there. That being said, if Paige Van Zandt were to upset, like, I wouldn't be hating it for a second. I'd be happy for her. I just have a hard time, in summation, seeing her win this fight, I guess.
Same. Exactly the same. I'm on exactly the same boat. But you continue doing you, Paige.
Yes.
I think it's cringy too. I don't follow her, but I can encourage it from afar.
If I could, market myself, and that's the thing, like, from managers to fighters to, like, even all these, like, idiots in the comment section, oh, well, you signed the contract, it's your fault for making this money. Like, I feel like all walks of life can agree that these fighters should be getting paid more and marketing themselves better. So it just seems like a real double standard. If you're gonna say that, but then hate on Paige there. So.
Oh, and we could go on and on, like you said, being women, and a lot of men will objectify her and have objectified her her entire career. But the moment she decides how she's gonna put her body up, that's a whole other podcast. But like that's a little element of it too. Like when she decides that she's gonna put her body on display the way that she wants to and maybe make some money off of it, people are outraged. So it's almost like we can't win. Interesting.
Yeah. How dare these fighters use their bodies to make money? Because they don't, they're not meant to do that. They're only fighters, they're kind of already using their bodies to make money. Oh boy, does it fall apart real fast, the arguments, doesn't it? Sorry.
Yep.
But yeah, much respect to all who step in there. Thank you for stepping in here, Fernanda. Before we get out of here, though, is there anything on the prelims you want to touch on? Because they're going to be stuck with me for the prelims. They're not going to hear anything. Anything you want to give a shout out, or just anything at all before we get out of here?
Yeah, my boy Eliseu Zaleski. He has 1,000 names officially in the UFC. I don't know why. Eliseu Zaleski is very freaking specific. You know me? I only know the one. Even in Brazil.
Easy dos Santos, if you're on the Co-Main Event podcast. Elijah Dusky, if you're on the MMA analysis. Shout out to those guys. He's got a lot of names. Sorry, go ahead. Good shout.
Eliseu Zaleski dos Santos. I'll give you the Brazilian pronunciation, but I can get that with easy. That's a good one. Or Capoeira, as he's known. Capoeira here. He's always a great fight, like regardless. He was given such a raw deal his entire career, buried in prelims. I don't know why. Getting bonuses, doing amazing fights, gets buried in the prelims. When they take him out, he fights the Leech and loses. It was just such a heartbreaking career arc, but he's amazing. He's always an exciting fighter, and he's fighting Salikov. Right?
Yep.
Now I'm butchering another nationality.
No, you said. I think you said it right.
After showing off with my Portuguese, who is also a highlight reel kind of guy, as far as I can remember. So I think that's kind of a barn burner. That would be my can't miss fight in the prelims.
Me too. I'm really excited to talk about that one. And I love some Easy Dos Santos there, Capoeira. He's something about that beard and look too. It's like, it's scary and stoic all at the same time. And then he comes out to my favorite, and I don't know if we'll get to catch this. We're getting less walkout music, which is bummer production. Come on, ESPN. Yeah. But show Dos Santos is because he comes out to Europe Final Countdown. Da 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 da. Da-da-da.
Which I find kind of generic, but I think in his case, as a walkout song, I think it's an amazing song. Like I use it to like motivate me in real life to do the dishes or just like face my existential pain. But again, a whole other podcast. But it works with him. Yeah, the whole look, the whole thing. I think Easy has been given a raw deal in his UFC career, so I'm looking forward for him to like make his way up again and get the love that he deserves. I've chosen this hill and I'm dying on it. That is it. That is my party message.
All right, you know what? Just for that, what the bridging music to bridge these segments is going to be Final Countdown. Just for that comment, Fernanda. Whether it's Dos Santos walking out or Fernanda doing her chores to it, let the sound of the '80s pump you up. But before we get to that, thank you again. Be sure to follow Fernanda on Twitter at Nanda Prates _ little cheeky _ and save the cheeky comments because there's enough hate and BS. I think we can just say on or off the MMA feeds alone. We don't need to add to it. Let's add to the fun, the funny, the positive, and try to make it more of a livable space, shall we?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, feel free to follow me and interact. Unless you're an asshole, then don't. Keep it to yourself. I don't need you in my life, and I will call you out. So there's that.
Okay, well, I hope this went well because I'm definitely going to be asking you to come back, whether it's a audio commentary for a movie track like a Jean-Claude Van Damme special, like I've been promising my audience for a while, or a top 5 show. I would love to have you back on. Thank you for coming on this time, and till next time.
Thank you.